Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are completely bypassing the boring stock market tickers and those endless spreadsheets to look at the real engine driving it all, human behavior. Because, economics really isn't just about money. It's actually a fascinating behavioral science that details exactly how we manage our lives when we are faced with absolute limits.
Okay, let's dive right in with a pretty bold statement from the renowned economist Paul Samuelson. He famously called economics the queen of social sciences. And why is that? Well, unlike natural sciences that you can test perfectly in a sterile lab, economics deals with the messy, abstract, and honestly unpredictable realm of human behavior. In fact, if you look at the origin of the term, it comes from the ancient Greek word oikonomia, which literally just means management of the household. At its core, it's all about how we humans attempt to satisfy our completely unlimited wants using our very limited means. So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, defining the social science. Second, exploring microeconomics and wants. Third, wealth, value, and production. Fourth, macroeconomics and the big picture. And finally, growth versus economic development. Section 1, defining the social science. We can actually trace some of the most profound economic thought all the way back to ancient India. In his famous treatise, the Arthashastra, Kautilya didn't view economics as just a way to make money. He saw it as the ultimate tool for state welfare. He recognized really early on that you just can't have a thriving society without efficient government administration. Acquiring and managing wealth had to fundamentally serve the greater good of the state. And it's fascinating to see how the absolute brightest minds shifted their focus over the centuries. Adam Smith, back in the 18th century, was zeroed in on raw wealth and capital. But jump a century later, and Alfred Marshall shifted that lens over to the ordinary man's welfare and material well-being. Ultimately, though, Lionel Robbins hit the nail on the head in the 20th century. He framed it as the modern truth we know today. It's that constant, daily clash between our unlimited wants and our incredibly scarce resources. To make sense of all these huge ideas, the discipline eventually had to be split in two. In 1933, Sir Ragnar Fresh coined two terms that we still use all the time today: micro, meaning small, and macro, meaning large. Microeconomics deals with individual variables. Think a single household, one worker, or a specific firm. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, looks at the vast aggregate variables, things like a whole country's total national income. Section 2. Exploring microeconomics and wants. Let's zoom in first on microeconomics, which is really driven by human wants. In economics, a want is simply defined as a feeling of a lack of satisfaction. And the defining trait of human wants? Well, they are entirely subjective and completely unlimited. As soon as you satisfy one, boom, another one pops right up. A child desperately wants a toy, a young adult might want a sleek new motorcycle, and an elderly person might just want a really good book. Our wants drastically change based on age, gender, personal preferences, culture, and yes, even the changing seasons. We actually categorize these wants to really figure out why we behave the way we do. We distinguish between an economic want that requires a monetary transaction, like buying groceries or medicine, and a non-economic want that is completely 100% free, like just enjoying the sunshine. We also look at individual wants, like a doctor needing her stethoscope, versus collective social wants, like commuters needing a functional train system. And of course, we instinctively rank these. We prioritize absolute necessities just to survive, then we graduate to comforts, and finally we chase luxuries meant purely for pleasure. Because let's be real, we all know someone whose luxury air-conditioned car feels like an absolute survival necessity to them. Section 3. Wealth, Value, and Production. Now, this brings us to a genuinely fascinating paradox. Seriously, have you ever stopped to wonder why water, which is completely essential for our very survival, is dirt cheap, while a diamond, which is purely decorative, costs an absolute fortune? The answer lies in what's known as the water-diamond paradox. It perfectly illustrates two wildly different approaches to value. First, there's value in use, which is just the raw usefulness of a commodity. Water has massive value in use. Then there's value in exchange, which is the worth of a commodity expressed in money, and that is driven almost entirely by scarcity. Water is super abundant, so its exchange value is incredibly low. Diamonds? They have incredibly low value in use, but because they are highly scarce, their value in exchange absolutely shoots through the roof. And that exchange value is exactly how economists define wealth. But here is the kicker. Not everything valuable is economic wealth. To count, it has to be useful,
It has to be scarce, and you must be able to transfer its ownership. That means it has to be external to your body. So, unfortunately, no matter how incredible your natural born singing voice might be, it simply doesn't count as economic wealth. To actually generate that wealth, we rely on a recipe with 4 very specific ingredients, or factors of production. You start with land, which earns rent. You apply human labor to that land, paying out wages. You utilize capital, meaning your tools and machinery, which cost interest. And tying the whole shebang together is the entrepreneur. They are the captain of the ship, and their ultimate reward for organizing all this chaos is profit. Section 4. Macroeconomics and the big picture. All right, now that we have the individual building blocks down, let's zoom all the way out. Macroeconomics is all about looking at the entire forest instead of just the individual trees. We aren't looking at personal incomes anymore. We're measuring our aggregate national income. That's the total monetary value of all final goods and services produced in a whole year. We look at how an entire society manages saving for the future and how those savings are mobilized into investment to create big capital assets. And crucially, we analyze trade cycles, the unavoidable massive ups and downs of business, tracking the continuous price rises of inflation against the devastating economic slumps of a depression. Section 5. Growth versus economic development. Finally, we have to make a massive distinction here, probably one of the most crucial takeaways of this entire explainer. Growth and development are not the same thing. Economic growth is just a narrow, purely quantitative number. It's a one-dimensional measure just asking, did the real national income go up? And honestly, that can happen spontaneously. Economic development, on the other hand, is a much broader qualitative concept. It implies growth, sure, but it demands progressive changes in the things that determine actual human well-being. We're talking health, education, the overall quality of human life. True development doesn't just happen. It is deliberate, it is multidimensional, and it is irreversible. You can absolutely have economic growth without economic development, but true development, that is absolutely impossible without growth. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take this economic lens out into the real world with you. Think about that final distinction we just covered. Look at the policies in your city, look at the new buildings going up, and look at the actual state of your local schools and hospitals. Ask yourself this. Look around your community today. Are you witnessing near economic growth, or are you seeing true economic development? And the answer to that question might just completely change how you view the world around you. Thanks for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.